Aliens Explored is a podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
The Thule Society sponsored the founding of the Nazi Party, and many of its members went on to become prominent Nazis, including Deputy Führer Rudolf Hess. But the group allegedly had a very strange set of beliefs. Many claim that the Thule Society believed alien beings were living in underground caverns right here on Earth. Join us on Aliens Explored as we try to unearth the truth about the Thule Society.
Hello listeners, welcome back to Aliens Explored, your weekly look at the mysterious skies and other related phenomena. I'm one of your hosts, Neil Kelly.
And I'm your other host, Stu Jackson. Hello, Neil. It's been a little while. How are you keeping?
Well, it hasn't for our listeners, but yeah, I've been keeping very well. Yeah,
it's been about a week.
It's been a week, yeah, like it usually is. What are you talking about?
Yeah, well, I mean, actually, now I saw you last on Monday anyway. Well, I say saw, but over through a screen.
But that's we haven't seen each other in any other way for over a year now, have we?
No, not in person. Well over a year, coming up on 2 years.
I think when was it? Was it February or January, February when we last met in person? When we started doing the 20-side game?
Oh, last year.
Table. Was it the beginning of last year?
I'm wondering now. Yeah, so about a year and a half then.
Yeah.
Year and a half, wow.
And who knows how much longer it's likely to be.
A lot longer, given the recent announcement by the UK
regime. Let's call
Pillock.
it the regime.
Pillock minister.
For those of our non-British listeners who aren't up to date, our Prime Minister has announced that the 19th of July will be Freedom Day, when all restrictions will simply be eased. I mean, our American listeners who live in Republican-governed states will be very familiar with having a leader who just says, no, we don't believe in this anymore, we're just going to do away with masks and all this other kind of stuff.
Scientific advisors have said, no, don't do it, it'll kill people, but freedom! Yeah, freedom and personal liberties.
We've been here a few times before, haven't we, with every single lockdown. The government has been resistant, the medical and scientific advisors have been saying, you really need to do this, and the government resists, and then eventually does do it, but usually a week or two too late with the cost, and then they'll open up again too early. So this is nothing new for us.
No. Well, I've been getting into a few arguments on Facebook. I mean, for Neil, that won't be a surprise at all. I do this a lot. But yeah, I've had people sort of spat to me, but it's my right to choose. It's about my personal freedom. So I, as a medically vulnerable person then, even though I've had both jabs now, if I were to actually get COVID, which there's still a chance of, in spite of being fully vaccinated, there's still a chance I could get it. If I were to get it, it would be pretty bloody serious. I mean, it's to the point of life-threatening. It would be pretty bad.
So they're saying basically my right to not wear a mask trumps your right to stay alive.
Well, so if it's about personal rights, does that mean then that it is my right? If it's their right to put my life at risk, is it my right to put their life at risk with the baseball bat if they come near me without a mask?
That will be an interesting legal test. I suspect the answer would be no. Followed by a lengthy prison sentence.
It's one of those nice thought experiments that I enjoy thinking about. It keeps me warm at night.
And of course,
beating non-mask wearers with a baseball.
What I fully expect to see on Freedom Day is our Prime Minister and all his ministers and all his government crowding into the House of Commons, which they haven't done for a long time, not wearing masks, and they're the whole day. So I would really love it if our new health minister Sajid Javid got a fatal dose. I mean, imagine the headline: Minister who says we need to learn to live with COVID dies of COVID.
Yeah, but it won't be their fault. It won't be their responsibility. I mean, the whole taking responsibility and taking credit for things with our government is incredible. I hate football with a passion, and England games in particular, mainly because domestic violence rates go up very dramatically during and shortly after any England game. It's a horrible, horrible statistic. But our England team are doing quite well at the football at the moment. But already our Prime Minister is taking credit for that.
As we knew he would. We knew he would.
Anyway.
And if Britain wins wins Euro 2020, it will be a vindication of Brexit. Yeah, we couldn't have done this without Brexit, and people will swallow it.
And yet, I believe of the 11 players on the pitch, 9 of them are immigrants,
or descended from recent immigrants.
Yeah. So, okay. Anyway, speaking of ruthless dictators who tell a lot of lies, shall we get on? We haven't even mentioned today's topic.
There was one thing I thought of. Remember when we did our live stream, we asked our listeners to come up with a name for our little grey.
Yes.
And then we've had one that I know of, one suggestion.
Oh, we've had quite a few. Sorry, I've not been keeping you up to date on this. I've got a list of names, which, do you know what? I'm not going to give them out over air.
Okay.
I'll give you the list off air. But yeah, I've been collating them. We get quite a growing list of names. I mean, and there are some absolute beauties in there. Absolute beauties.
So it'll be the usual arbitrary, games against Cards Against Humanity rules. It's just the one we like best.
Well, that is the official rule. Yes, the one that we, between the two of us, we like the best.
Okay.
So we'll have to see. But just to remind our listeners, just in case you're not aware, yes, on our artwork, in between the amazing portraits of myself and Neil, as done by Cy Monstrous Art, you have a grey alien. If you can come up with a good name for this grey alien, send it to us at aliensexplored@gmail.com before the end of the 25th of July, and the person or the name that we pick out, that person wins a t-shirt. Yay! So there we go. That's the 25th of July 2021, just in case you're listening to this in the way distant future.
Or in another dimension.
Who knows? But that's a good call to mention the competition, Neil. It's a good reminder. But that's not what we're here for today, is it?
Today we're here to talk about the Thule Society.
Thule, or as I keep calling it, the Thule Society.
And English would pronounce it Thule. Germans would pronounce it Thule. It looks like fuel.
Now, actually, I'm going to. We know this was a German society, so I think probably the German pronunciation is correct. But I discovered in my research it actually comes from a Greek word.
Yes.
Or a Greek name, which would actually make it the Thule Society. Because the Greeks pronounce their THs as Ds. Or it's actually like, well, it's sort of halfway between the two. The.
Well, the delta is pronounced as a kind of hard the.
Delta. Yeah, delta.
And when they want to say a hard D, That's spelt NT.
Yes, it's a bit weird.
So,
but let's stick with Thule.
We'll stick with Thule. Yeah, the Thule Society. So this was a secret society. So that's always fascinating. That always invites a lot of speculation. That was formed towards the end of the First World War by a war veteran. What was his name again?
I can't remember, but yes, it was.
I remember he came to a sticky end quite quickly. Should have had this on my fingertips.
Dead air's not
Walter Nauhaus.
There we go. So, but most importantly, you've got some very notable members of the Thule Society, haven't you?
Well, a lot of people have been, a lot of prominent Nazis have been associated with it, including the famous Rudolf Hess. He's probably the most famous name there. Alfred Rosenberg, Hans Frank, Julius Lehmann, Gottfried Feder, Dietrich Eckhardt, and Karl Harrer. But yeah, Rudolf Hess is the one that stands out.
I'd have thought Adolf Hitler was probably the more famous.
Well, Nauhaus claimed that that his group was basically the origins of the Nazi Party. I mean, they were a right-wing society that was became a. Nauhaus was a wounded World War I veteran who became an art student from Berlin, and he was concerned with the Order of Teutons, and they became very concerned with tracking German purity.
Yeah, lineage.
Aryan purity. Their lineage. They had an oath. The signer hereby swears to the best of his knowledge and belief that no Jewish or coloured blood flows in either his or in his wife's veins, and that among their ancestors are no members of the coloured races. So, yeah, you can see how that would be attractive to Nazis.
Well, it comes into this whole Aryan race thing. So the speculation is, in fact, that Aryans were extraterrestrials who came to Earth and seeded the Earth, or seeded part of the Earth. In fact, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed part of the Earth. So it was looking for this sort of Aryan, this extraterrestrial purity. That was part of the whole Aryan race, the alleged better race, or whatever.
But that wasn't just in Britain. I know in the 19th century there were certain people who they were concerned that British people were no longer too comfortable with colonialism, and although slavery had been abolished by that time, and similarly very concerned about the rise of Germany, which overtook Britain as an industrial power in the 1870s during a great recession in Britain, that they developed this creed which basically said the white English speaking peoples of the world are descended from one of the lost tribes of Israel, and therefore have the right to enslave and exploit anyone else that they see fit. It was justification for the empire, but also they saw Germany as the Antichrist, because they were and this creed still exists. It's more prominent in America, where it's embodied in their ideas of manifest destiny. But yeah, you still come across it, and they still see the Germans as the bad guys, as the Antichrist.
I think it's human nature, though, to see yourself or your, it's tribalism, which back when we were a series of small tribes dotted around the land, genetically, it served us, but it's a leftover from that. I think that is very much human nature. Yeah. But I feel we're going off. I'm trying to keep it to the UFOs. That's why I mentioned the extraterrestrials, Neil. Sure. Because I don't want us to divert too far away. We're already halfway through this week.
Well, I mean, in popular fiction, certainly the Nazis are given all sorts of there's a mystery that's still about the Nazis that's still attractive. You see it in Indiana Jones movies, the Nazis seeking occult powers. They've appeared before that, haven't they? I believe that in Captain America comics, the Red Skull was the head of the Thule Society, and there was an organisation called, is it the Hydra, who are believed to be SS.
Just to clarify, going back a little bit there, when you say that they're very attractive, I assume you mean from an entertainment perspective.
Well,
you
no.
said that Nazis were attractive.
There's also a fascination, especially amongst far right circles. This idea of the Nazi, the SS officer, as the very sophisticated.
I'm trying to clarify here. Are you saying that you like the idea of Nazis?
No, what I'm saying is that popular fiction likes the idea of Nazis, but it's not the Nazi who's just the small-minded, small-town bigot who hates black people and Jews. It's this guy who's had an international education. He has a sophisticated outlook. He holds his cigarette between his between the next two sets of fingers as he smokes and says, we are very alike, you and I, when he's interrogating some hapless prisoner.
The Bond villain.
Yeah, the Bond villain type. Yeah, and of course the reason why the Nazis are associated with UFOs is because, for one thing, they developed technologies during the Second World War. Even though they were having the crap bombed out of them, they were still able to come up with ballistic missiles, drones, and jet aircraft in a war that had started with biplanes and cavalry charges. So there's a mystery about that. Perhaps Allied bombing wasn't quite as effective as they like to believe it was. In those days, bombing technology rarely allowed people to hit anything smaller than a city, especially at night. So all you have to do is move your development plants out of the cities. And also there was the sighting of these strange lights in the sky, seen by Axis pilots as well as Allied pilots of what came to be called the Foo Fighters. And many Allied pilots believed that these were some kind of German technology, even though they weren't very good at shooting down Allied planes, because they never did.
Well, there's certainly a lot of theories and a lot of concepts out there about German UFO, and certainly we've covered some of that in previous episodes. No doubt we'll be coming back to that again. But specifically about the Thule Society, what I've been reading is that a subsection of the Thule Society, in particular, known as the Vril Society. Have you been coming across this?
I have heard it. Again, that Vril is kind of a legendary thing, isn't it?
Well, it ties in very closely with Hitler's sort of obsession with the occult and extraterrestrial things. A quick side note: Thule was we mentioned it's got Greek origins, and it was the name of a mythical sort of northernmost land. I mean, possibly people have said it might be Scandinavia or,
Iceland, or where no one has been, but they knew that somewhere in the north there was this.
Yeah, well, it became more commonly sort of used as being a reference to the edge of the known world, or the edge of what is known. And I think that's why it was picked as the name for this society, is because it was, they in their heads, they were pushing the edge of the boundaries of what is known and that kind of thing. So it's very much, I mean, certainly the Thule Society were very much like the occult and things like that. But the Vril in particular, that was formed by, or the idea was put forward by an author, French author, as it happens, Louis-Jacques Olliot, who I'd never heard of. But if I was to give you the phrase, Neil, the pen is mightier than the sword.
Ah, yes.
He's the person who came up with that. He's also the person who came up with the classic opening line of a book. It was a dark and stormy night. But yeah, he purported to have discovered this Vril energy, this otherworldly power. I mean, you could say occult, you could say extraterrestrial, maybe a bit of both in there. And that, this Vril society were then desperate to try and get it to power their aircraft and weapons, and the women of the Vril society were encouraged, I know, to grow their hair very long, because hairs, it was thought, might be an antenna to the brain. So they did. They had hair pretty much down to the floor, some of them. Really, some interesting pictures there.
So are we talking antimatter or anti-gravity technology?
More like, as I understand it, more like an energy form that is manipulated to produce those other things.
Right.
In the way that you might use magnetism as an energy to create a magnetic lift. So anti-gravity, you could say.
Right, so from the energy that is all around us, isn't that what atomic power is, though? You're going to split atoms and...
Well, that is a form of energy as well. And certainly, when you look at Project Paperclip, it's absolutely clear that Germans were interested in all kinds of energy forces, different kinds of energies. So it's not surprising that someone would latch onto this energy that was allegedly powering extraterrestrial craft and weapons, and and that Hitler would want to get his hands on it.
And there's also the Nazis did lay claim to a part of the Antarctic back just before the Second World War, and there's a belief that they'd found the entrance to the Hollow Earth, and that's where all the Nazis went and lived, or they met people who lived in this Hollow Earth, and they joined up with them, and that's where they all went after the war.
Well, the theory is those are the Aryans of which I spoke earlier. They've come from another planet, possibly, or they're another species of humanoid that shares the planet and lives underneath it. We're not quite sure. There are different theories about them, but yes, that they are the Aryans.
Well, of course, a lot of Nazis went missing, so they were unaccounted for at the end of the Second World War. But of course, in modern warfare, using high explosives, people do tend to be missing rather than leaving a nice identifiable corpse. I certainly remember when the wall came down in Berlin, and all of East Berlin, it was either pre-war buildings that were getting a bit unstable, maybe had some bomb damage that certainly didn't meet Western building standards, or they were old, or they were recently built communist concrete blocks that, again, seems, I think it was P.J. O'Rourke said that commies love concrete, but they don't know how to mix it. That's why in Eastern Bloc countries, everything's made of concrete and everything's falling apart. So basically, East Berlin was demolished. I went there shortly after the wall came down, and it had been levelled, and it was just a massive building site with loads and loads of cranes. And then for years afterwards, they were finding bodies as they dug, and they were finding on average 1,000 a year for a long, long time. Well, you imagine 100,000 people killed in the Battle of Berlin. That's going to leave an awful lot of bodies under rubble wait to be found.
Yeah. So
I imagine a lot of prominent Nazis ended up in that mass grave that was East Berlin.
Well, quite possibly. Well, I know that there were a lot of prominent Nazis who their whereabouts were known during the end of the war, but it was shortly after. Suddenly they disappeared. I mean, you get that in fiction a lot, don't you? Suddenly in South America, someone turns up. Hi, I'm Bill Smith, and it turns out he's an ex-Nazi.
my sister-in-law used to work in publishing, and she went to this convention in the United States, and at the start of the convention they said, it was the Disney Corporation, and they made this special presentation to our colleagues from Disney South America, who've been running a very efficient and profitable organisation since 1945. And he called them up, and it was Herr von Braun, Herr von Schmidt. It was they were all of German descent.
Okay, we're not saying
Disney
that
South
the
America,
Disney Corporation. I'm not a fan of Disney at all.
Oh, come on, you like your Star Wars and your Marvel, and this all Disney, isn't it?
Yeah, but Star Wars wasn't created by Disney, neither was Marvel. No, I enjoyed some of the products that they put out, but their history, particularly their anti-Semitic history, leaves a lot to be desired.
Oh, I'm sure that I think our listeners might disagree. I think Disney are evil, and always have been.
Yeah, well, you or I, for instance, would not be allowed to work for them currently, you know.
And why is that?
Because we've got facial hair.
Oh, right.
That still applies now. They've said it used to be because obviously a lot of Jewish people, they would have facial hair. It was to keep them out. Disney have since said, "Oh no, it's because you're cleaner and you look more heroic and you look more positive if you don't have facial hair." But they still have the policy. Disney, and I'm sorry, but that's nonsense.
Didn't Walt Disney himself have a moustache?
He did. Yeah. But there you go. Anyway, let's not talk too much about it because they are famously litigious, even against Paul or you and me. So there may be other explanations.
So do you have to hereby swear to the best of your knowledge and belief that no Jewish or coloured blood flows in either yours or your wife's veins?
It would not surprise me. Actually, I know people who do work for offshoots of the Disney Corporation, but that's a whole other thing. Anyway, we're off topic.
Yeah, and we won't name them on this show.
Absolutely not. So, Thule Society then. So yes, you've got this Vril Society that is a small sort of subsection of them. Let's sort of summarise our thoughts then. So a question I ask you quite a lot on this podcast, Neil. Prior to us doing this, had you heard of them before or come across them?
I don't know. I mean, the only reference I had for Thule before we started talking about it, perhaps in an earlier episode, was I bought a roof rack once in Germany that was made by Thule. A roof rack for my car. Yeah, it's also a brand of.
Does your car run on Vril energy? Is that what we're saying?
Yes, that's yes.
When was the last time you put any fuel in it?
This was a long time ago.
Right. So in your research then, what? I mean, what do you think? Is it all just mythological? Is it all just made up, or?
I think it's. I mean, I know that prominent Nazis did have an interest in the occult. And the Nazis were able to produce some quite terrifying technology towards the end of the war. That was a nasty surprise for the Allies. I don't think they ever expected to win the war. I mean, the V1 and V2, the V1, which was a drone, basically a flying bomb, and the V2, which was a ballistic missile. The V stands for Verachungswaffe, which means revenge weapon. I.e., we're not trying to win the war with this. We just want to give you some pain for bombing us. You've bombed us. We no longer have the capability of bombing you because our air force just keeps getting shot down. But we have these new technologies that we can inflict harm. They're not very accurate. I mean, the drone was basically a plane. They'd set it off in the right direction, and it'll be timed for the engine to cut when it reached near London, or over London, and it would come down and kill indiscriminately. Same with the V2 rockets. It was just for revenge. So it was certainly advanced. But it wasn't war winning, and it wasn't that advanced. But the combination of the two, the occultism and the frightening technologies, and also with on the part of people in countries like Britain, who it's easier to say that the Nazis were evil. They got involved in the occult. I think even in secondary schools in Britain to this day, so that's children between 11 and 18, that what they learn about Germany tends to begin and end with the Nazis. And what they're still taught, I learned from my wife, who's a school teacher, is that the Nazis happened because the German people were led astray by an evil man. It's so much easier to sweep it under the carpet by just saying, "Oh yeah, they were evil. That's why it happened." It's so much easier than saying, "Well, it was a consequence of colonialism, which led to a devastating war, which led to great poverty, and then you had the Great Depression, which put the Nazis in power, and then you had British firms, Western firms were happy to collude in the Nazi build-up of armaments in the 1930s, and the governments were allowing that because they were more concerned about Stalin and the Bolsheviks in the Soviet Union." So, and they liked the idea of a strongly rearmed, albeit illegally rearmed, Germany between us. Without going into all of that, it's easier to just say, "Oh yeah, they got involved in the occult and they were evil," and it produces also it gives us fascinating or entertaining stories like Indiana Jones or Captain America and the Red Skull and Hydra and that sort of thing. But I think really there was an interest in the occult, but I don't think. There's no evidence that they produced any kind of technology which isn't easily understood or wasn't easily understood at the time. They just managed to get technologies to work.
Well, just to add to your sort of historical take there, that has happened in more recent history as well, because you look at Saddam Hussein, it's the American and British governments who put him in power in the first place.
Yeah.
Who kept him in power for a very, very long time until it was time that they needed a scapegoat.
Absolutely,
and then suddenly he's evil, and
we want his oil, so suddenly he's become evil.
He must have these weapons of mass destruction, which they've still never found.
Yes.
Well,
I was involved in intelligence gathering in the Middle East in the 1980s when Saddam Hussein was waging a war against Iran. He'd attacked Iran and found it a tough enough that it was expected that in the chaos of the Iranian Revolution, the more organised Soviet armed Iraqi forces would easily overrun them, and it was almost a repeat of Operation Barbarossa on a smaller scale. They made some great initial advances, but then the Iranians got their act together and with massive human sacrifice were able to just drive them back all the way. It was a long drawn out war, but it was still very much Saddam Hussein is our guy, and he's fighting these Islamic fanatics in Iran who are the bad guys.
Yeah. It's a complicated issue. But yeah, so I suppose I better give you my opinion on the Thule Society, hadn't I? I'm absolutely convinced that certainly the Thule Society existed. There's much argument about that. I'm convinced that the Vril Society existed. I wouldn't be surprised if they had a degree of success as well. There are certainly reports of them achieving some things, and where you say there's no evidence of them creating weapons that achieved anything, I'm going to draw your attention to the Nazi bell, which was a device that was created and subsequently disappeared, that could well be connected with Vril power, and it's been speculated may even have been some sort of time machine.
But they just can't find it.
Yep, exactly. So that might explain a few things, but who knows? I mean, yeah, probably for me, it's kind of it's this whole Nazis and aliens thing.
Which is fascinating. It makes a great action movie.
It would, but I think I think there's something to it. I wouldn't like to say categorically what level that is, but I do think there is something to it, and it's worth investigating. But what do you think, listeners? As ever, we do like to hear your thoughts and feelings on this subject, on all our subjects that we talk about here. You can let us know exactly what you think by finding us on Facebook or Twitter by searching Aliens Explored, or you can email us at aliensexplored.com. And don't forget to enter that competition as well that we mentioned. In the meantime, join us next time. Oh, Neil, I'm very excited for our next episode. I'm always excited for all our episodes, but I'm particularly excited
if our listeners could just see the look on your face, how animated you suddenly become.
Well, and with good reason, because we are going to be discussing probably the most documented UFO abduction case in history. We're going to be talking about Travis Walton. Exciting.
And Travis Walton, if you're listening, please do feel free to join in.
Oh yes, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to interview you. Yeah, absolutely. Do share your thoughts. In the meantime, keep watching those, secret societies. I can't come up with one for this week. I always come up with these off the top of my head, Neil.
But keep an eye out for Nazis anyway. That's always good advice.
Keep watching out for Nazis and the sky. Watch out for the skies. That doesn't make sense. Keep watching that history.
and catch you next week.
We will catch you next. Take care.
Bye.
Aliens Explored is a Fecal Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter or Facebook by searching Aliens Explored, or visit us on aliensexplored.com.